Good afternoon. Bienvenidos. My name is Patricia Avila, and I want to welcome all of you here today. We are in for a really big treat with Dolores Huerta today. So again, thank you for traveling to come and be with us and coming from class, etc. I'm going to go ahead and have my colleague introduce himself, and then we're going to go ahead and do some welcome and some introductions.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Benjamin Vargas. I am a supervisor of basic needs and wellness here at Riverside City College. I am on the equity committee, also part of the ALASS, the Latino Association on campus as well. So we're really delighted to have our guest speaker today for our in celebration of Latino History Month.
So before we have Ms. Huerta speak, we wanted to welcome some important and distinguished guests this afternoon, and we also wanted to thank our sponsors for today. So before I do that, I want to go ahead and have our RCCD Chancellor, Dr. Waldab Isak, if he could just stand or wave to everyone. We thank him for being here today. We also have Mary Figueroa, one of our Board of Trustees, is here this afternoon. I believe our Vice President of Academic Affairs, Dr. Lynn Wright, is here with us this afternoon as well. I'm not sure if I'm forgetting another, I think Dr. Thomas Cruz Soto, are you here this afternoon? Yep, there he is. Our Dean of Student Services. Our Vice President of Student Services, Dr. Farida Carter, is with us here as well. So we want to thank her.
Kyla.
Our Dean of Enrollment Services, Kyla Toffel, is here as well. So thank you for being here. And any other administrators that are here with us today, I want to thank you for coming. Our sponsors for today are, we definitely want to thank our associated students of RCC for their contribution to making this happen, our Veterans Resource Center, the Latina Leadership Network Club, the Puente Club, LASSI, our Student Equity Committee, the Office of the President, our associated students of Norco College, and our Puente students as well from Norco are here today this afternoon, so we thank them for being here. ALASS is the Association of Latinx Advocating for Student Success, as Ben said, and so they are also one of our sponsors. So again, we want to thank everyone for helping us make this event happen. So without further ado, I want to go ahead and turn it over to Dolores Huerta. Again, thank you so much for making the trip to be with us today.
Thank you very much for inviting me. Buenos dias, everybody. Thank you. And it's always good to come here to the Riverside area. As I was saying earlier, I think Riverside is on the map. You know, it's on the map. It's on the map. And of course, you are the ones that are making that happen. And thank you very much for celebrating Hispanic, Mexican, Guatemalan, and Salvadorian. We can go on and on, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, all of Latin America, our Heritage Month. So it's so important that this is celebrated. And you know, I like to start out with kind of saying to people, Google the map of the United States before 1848. And what you will find when you Google that map is that a third of the United States was Mexico, 1/3. And as we know in the Mexican-American War, that the United States took 50% of Mexico, of the country, became the United States. Right now, we hear a lot about what's happening with the Russians and they're trying to take over Ukraine, say, hey, we remember something like that. It happened to us. It happened to us, right? When they took half of Mexico to become the United States. And I think it's always important that we remember that and we share that knowledge with other people, because believe it or not, a lot of people don't know that history. I once had a professor, a college professor in Oregon, ask me, why do so many cities in California have Spanish names? I said, duh, because that was part of Mexico. And you know what Cesar Chavez said? Yeah, Yeah, they took the country from Mexico, but we're going to get it back. We're going to buy it back lot by lot. We're going to buy it back lot by lot. And we see that that is happening right now. Because we see that, for instance, right now in Texas, Arizona, and New Mexico, the Latino population is the majority population in those 3 states. And in California, we're 40% of the population right now. So what does that mean? It means that we are growing and growing and growing, and our population is getting bigger. But we know that we still, unfortunately, still do suffer from discrimination. There's a great movie, by the way, if you haven't seen it, it's a documentary called Foreigners in Their Own Land. Kind of want to write that down. It's on PBS, Public Broadcasting. Isai Morales and many of the people that we know are the moderators in that film. But I thought I knew the story about how the United States took all of the property from Mexico. I thought I knew it, but you know what? I didn't know it. Even though I was born in the state of New Mexico, which is, of course, one of the states that the United States took. So I just wanted to say to all of you, if you get a moment, kind of look at that documentary. Another interesting thing too, another new documentary that just came out from Ken Burns, the documentarian, and it's called United States and the Holocaust. This is a new documentary, came out about 2 weeks ago. But in that documentary, Ken Burns talks about how in Nazi Germany, they actually took the playbook from the United States about how the United States exterminated the Native Americans and the way that the United States handled all other people, like Chinese Exclusion Act, etc. And that's kind of an interesting thing to look at also. And I say that because we know that right now in the United States, we are confronting fascism. We see that that's happening now. We all know what happened on January 6th. We have all of these people who tried to stop the vote for our president, Joseph Biden, and all of the violence that took place there. The people were killed, etc. And I think in the United States that we a lot of people thought that we were safe from that kind of violence. And that couldn't happen in our country, but we see that it did happen and is happening, and that the racism against people of color, including Latinos, is still continuing. So we might say in some respects that this is bad what's going on right now, but at the same time, I don't know how you feel, but I think that sometimes the issue has to be brought up and you have to have a spotlight on it. If not, it goes unresolved for decades. In terms of our case, we can say for centuries that Latinos have faced a kind of terrible discrimination again in their own land. And I also like to remind people the true immigrants to the United States of America were the people that came from Europe. Like one of my great grandmothers who came from Spain, Maria de Jesus Baena, and I have a great grandfather that actually came from England also. And by the way, he was in the Civil War on the right side, on the Union side. But in terms of the indigenous people of the continent, a lot of whom I think are here in our audience, we are the true, you might say, this is our land. The North American continent and the South American continent, this is our land. We are the ones that belong here. We are not the foreigners. And when we see people that come to our borders and they're seeking asylum, they're really coming back to their own land. It's not another land. And when they talk about my country, they should use the word our government, okay? Because the country was already here and the country was brown, when all of these immigrants from Europe came here. And so we have to kind of remind people of that history because number one, they were not taught it or they don't know it. And so we can be the teachers and teach them the real history of the United States. Like I said, the Howard Zinn history of the United States of America. And when a lot of those people that are coming to our borders and they're seeking asylum, and we often say, well, why are they coming? We know that they're escaping poverty. They're escaping things that are happening right now with global warming, where people are losing their crops. And so they're escaping hunger, they're escaping violence. But we in the United States, we never look at ourselves to see how are we causing that problem that the people in Central America and other parts of Latin America have to come here to seek asylum. And I like to use one word, bananas. You probably think, why am I using that word, bananas? Well, when we think of how many bananas do we consume every day in the United States of America, jillions of bananas. So you would think that with all of the bananas that we eat, and coffee too, by the way, that the people in Guatemala, El Salvador, and Nicaragua, places where those bananas are grown, that they would be very wealthy just from all of the bananas that we eat. But no, it's not that way, because the money that we pay for the bananas, it does not go to the people in Guatemala or El Salvador, or Honduras. The money that we pay for bananas goes to who? United States corporations, the Chiquita Banana, United Fruit Company, Dole Banana, all of these other banana companies. So somehow, if the money that we paid for bananas and for coffee went to the people on whose land those products are produced, and they're the ones that do the work to produce the product, then there would not be that much poverty. And then when we think of the violence, okay, we know that in El Salvador, that they had a lot of the gang members that were deported to El Salvador. So a lot of these young people in the cities like Los Angeles and New York, like that, the Salvatruchas, these were young people. They were getting in trouble. And they were told when they went to court, you can go to jail or you can be deported. So we deported a whole bunch of them. Well, they were already having trouble when they were here, and deporting them back to their other countries where they were going to be, not be even worse off than what they were here. That didn't help the problem. Instead of what we should have done is helping those young people there so that they could rehabilitate themselves instead of sending them back. So we might say that we created that problem also. And then we had the wars. There were all these wars in Central America, again in El Salvador and Honduras and these places, in Nicaragua. And we were on the wrong side in those wars. So we went in there, we made a big mess, and we never went back to clean it up. So, we have to say the US government is responsible for a lot of the issues. And I know that there are a lot of people really badmouth or don't like Hugo Chavez. But Hugo Chavez said something very profound. He said, the oil of Venezuela belongs to the people of Venezuela. And when he became the president, he kicked out all the US and the English oil companies. And he had a lot of vision. And I'm saying this because I actually met with Hugo Chavez, Harry Belafonte, Cornel West, and a group of us went down there, Chavez Smiley. We were there with Hugo Chavez. And we visited Venezuela and saw what his vision was. And they were making cooperatives in some of the rural areas so that people would be able to manufacture products among themselves and wouldn't have to come to the city, to Caracas. So they had the agricultural cooperatives where the people came together and they were growing their own food for their own community. They had programs for the gangs so that the gangs, they would go in there and facilitate and arbitrate and mediate to get the gang members together. And we met with some of these gang members. And the president would go to every community, and every Sunday, and this was a public broadcast that he would do, and he would ask the people in each community, what is happening in your community, and what do you need from me? And people were there, they were open sessions, people could go up there and talk directly give their complaints to the president. It was very, very democratic. And unfortunately, we know the US, we tried to assassinate him, and that didn't happen. But eventually he got sick with cancer, he passed away, etc. But these are the things I think a lot of us don't know. One of the things that, as all of you students know, and we have a lot of issues right now, they're talking about the student debt right now. And so many students are saddled with student debt. Well, one of the things that we have to fight for in the future is make sure that all college education is free, okay? Put that on your agenda, everybody. Put that on your agenda. And also, that all healthcare, universal healthcare, that all of that is also free. And we know that in California, we're doing pretty good right now because we have Medi-Cal, and we have Covered California. And as of 2024, all undocumented people in California are going to be covered with Medi-Cal. So right now we have from age 1, the time they're born, until age 29, and then from 49 and above, undocumented people are covered with Medi-Cal. And this is really important, so you can share this also with people that you know, is that this does not affect your immigration status, okay? If later on that undocumented person is trying to legalize their status in the United States, getting Medi-Cal from California does not affect your immigration status. And the reason why is because the money is coming from the state of California, not from the federal government. I want to repeat that, okay? The money is coming from the state of California, not from the federal government. So you can share that to people that they might be a little bit intimidated, or they think, well, I don't want to get that health care because I might want to immigrate myself, or in the future immigrate maybe one of my family members or somebody. So they have to know that that does not affect their immigration status, okay? So these are things that we have to really work for. And there is one country that I want to mention, and maybe some of you have been there, and that is Cuba. And Cuba is a tiny little country that has an economic boycott by the United States of America right now. But guess what they have in Cuba? Free healthcare, free college education for every resident in Cuba. In fact, there are people that go from all other countries and even people from the United States that go to Cuba to become doctors, and it's free. The only thing they want you to do is if you become a doctor in Cuba, they want you to go back to your communities, especially a low-income community, and help the people there that are low income. So we have to ask ourselves, okay, really? We're the richest country in the world, and we cannot have free college education for our students, and we cannot have free health care, and we cannot have free daycare for our women, okay, for our families. And by the way, New Mexico, the governor there, Michelle Lujan, they have just passed all low-income families have free childcare for their children. And New Mexico is a poor state compared to California. So these are the things that we have to work for.
Dolores, if I may, we have a task force here at the college that addresses and works to support our undocumented student community. Can you share a few words with us, some words of encouragement for our students who are undocumented, that are in our halls, in our classrooms, in our spaces? Sometimes they feel a little discouraged because, federally, they're not supported, but the state of California does an exceptional job supporting our students who are undocumented. And I wanted to ask if you could share some words.
Well, actually, I was going to come to that at the end.
Okay, okay, we can get back to that.
Okay, we'll put it in the middle. And basically, it comes down to elections. And we had an amnesty bill that happened in 1986. A lot of people, and I know people in the audience probably have somebody, a friend or family member, that got their legalization in that amnesty in 1986. And a lot of people gave Ronald Reagan credit for that, but it was not Ronald Reagan. It was Ted Kennedy, may he rest in peace, Senator Ted Kennedy. It was Howard Berman from California, Congressman from here, Peter Rodino from New Jersey, and Schumer, Senator Schumer, who is now the head of the Senate. Then he was in the House of Representatives. They are the poor people that got that bill through the Congress. How do I know? Because I was there for 4 months working on that bill, okay?
Wow.
And we got millions of people that got their legalization status when we passed that amnesty bill. So how do we get the next amnesty, which is now 20-some years behind schedule? And the way that we do that is we have to get more Democrats elected to the House of Representatives and to the Senate. And right now we have an election year coming up right now. And if you all can help, I think the Senate, the U.S. Senate is going, I think the Democrats are going to take it. And I know this is not a political This is just information that I'm giving you, okay? But because they have a lot of idiots running for the Senate. They have a lot of MAGA idiots running for the Senate. So right now, it looks like the Senate looks like it's in pretty good shape, whether we can get the Senate. The House of Representatives is a little bit more iffy right now. And myself, my organization, the Dolores Huerta Foundation, or actually Dolores Huerta Action Fund, this is our C4. We're working on a couple of congressional seats, one in the Central Valley where we have Latino Luis Salas, now in the Assembly, he's running for the Congress. And then there's another seat up there in the Antelope Valley, a woman named Chrissy Smith, and she's a Democrat running. So I just one thing I want to say to all of you, that I hope that you can get involved in the elections, okay? I'm begging you to please volunteer to go out there and do some door knocking or do some phone banking so we can get progressive people elected to the Congress. And this is how we get amnesty. There's already a bill in the Congress right now, but we have to hold on to the House of Representatives, you know, have Nancy Pelosi be our leader out there so that we can get another amnesty bill. Yeah, we know that we need it right now, but the way that we get it is by election. And that, a lot of young people don't understand that. They think, I'm going to go out there and march, I'm going to go out there and protest, and this is how we make things happen. No, it doesn't work like that. Unless we put things into a law that can be implemented, you know, that can be enforced, and that people can be held accountable if they don't do what the law says, you know, then and marching is wonderful, and protests, and, you know, I've been in many marches. We were recently with the farm workers as they marched to Sacramento, and the governor finally signed that bill, by the way, that they were marching for. But we have to put it into a law. And elections are the foundations of our democracy. You know, Abraham Lincoln said that the ballot is more powerful than the bullet. Remember that, the ballot, you know, what we mark to vote with, that is more powerful than the bullet. And I talked about our Latino population and how we've grown, but you know what? We don't vote, you know, and that is what really sets us back, because the only way that we're going to be able to end the discrimination that we have faced for so many, many decades, generations, is by electing people and putting people in power that are going to bring the resources to our community so that we can end the discrimination that we have. And, you know, our foundation, the Dolores Huerta Foundation, we had to file a lawsuit against our school district in Bakersfield, you know, kind of Bakersfield, Alabama, okay? Because they had suspended over 2,000, about 2,500 students and high school students in 1 year. And 90% of them were Black and brown students. And can you imagine that? In 1 year, 2,500 students. So we were able to, after our lawsuit, we got that down from 2,500 expulsions to less than 21, you know? Wow. But it took a lawsuit to make that happen, and we had to organize the parents and the students to get the information and to get them to support that lawsuit. But that's what we have to do. And even, I just want to talk about, you know, our foundation too, for the census. And many times we have to beg people, please sign up for the census, please sign up for the census. So we were able to get 84,000 people in the Central Valley, I'm talking about Fresno, Tulare, Kern County, to sign up for the census. And then after we got those numbers, they had to make new seats, new districts for people to get elected. Well, we have a great demographer, a Chicano, Jesus Garcia, and a genius, and he made new maps. And then we had the people come and testify. They took hundreds of community surveys. And when the independent commission, because in California, we have an independent commission that draws the maps. So we had our act together. We had the data, we had the numbers, we had the information, and people went to all the hearings. So we had hundreds of people that filled the community surveys and then went and testified, and we got new maps. And now we're going to get the first Latino from the Central Valley, Luis Salas, elected in this election.
That's great.
But it does take a lot of, it takes a lot of work. And then and I think here in Riverside too, we just passed a bill, 3 bills actually, one for Riverside County, one for Kern County, and for Fresno. That we're going to have an independent commission also draw the maps for these areas too, because unfortunately, the independent commission that draws the maps is only for the Congress and Assembly and Senate districts. But now, because of the laws that we passed, Riverside County, this county here, Kern and Fresno are going to have an independent commission to draw the maps for these counties also. And why is that important? Because a lot of the money that comes from the federal government or the state government, it goes through the county supervisors, okay? And the county supervisors, sometimes they don't look like us. And it's very hard to get our people elected to the board of supervisors. But when we have these independent commissions, they're going to have to draw maps that reflect the people that live in the communities, and that will help us get the resources. Like on our board of supervisors in Kern County, we have one Latina Democrat on the board of supervisors. The rest of them are really very, very conservative. I mean, I'll tell you how bad they are. 3 of them, when they were on the city council of Bakersfield, tried to pass a law that undocumented people could not get public services, could not go to parks. Can you imagine that? And that they wanted an English-only city in Bakersfield. Well, we organized, and we were able to get a lot of people to come to those city council meetings, and so we squashed that so they couldn't pass that law. But it took a lot of people power and energy to make that happen. Another thing I want to say to you all about the election is this. A lot of our Latino community, a lot of us are confused on some of the issues. And I'm going to talk about 2 of those issues. One of them is women's reproductive rights, women's right to abortion. Now, I have 11 children, okay? I have a daughter, Juanita, a former teacher, who has dogs and cats instead. She doesn't want any kids. I respect my daughter's choice, and obviously she respects my choice, okay? Having been one of my daughters. And so we have to say this to our families. When it comes to the issue of abortion, this is a woman's right, okay? A woman has, and she is the only one that has the right to decide what to do with her body. And I want to, and for our family members or friends or relatives that we know or neighbors that are say they vote the wrong way because they say, I'm not going to vote for so-and-so because they're pro-abortion, okay? They're for women's reproductive rights. I'm going to share the words of Benito Juárez. What did Benito Juárez say? El respeto al derecho ajeno es la paz, right? Respecting other people's rights is peace. Respecting a woman's choice, a family's choice about how many children they want to have or not have, that is their human right. And the same applies to gay marriage, okay? Who you love, who you live with, who you marry, that is your human right. And nobody should interfere with that. So please share that message with people that you know, because a lot of times people vote the wrong way, and they vote against their own self-interest because their priest, told them the way to vote. Okay, religion and politics should be totally separate. This is what Jesus Christ said. All right, So just remember that and share that with people, please, because we have so many Latinos right now that are voting the wrong way because of that issue of abortion. Because if they go to mass on Sunday or they go to their evangelical church and they tell them to vote the wrong way. Remember this, that under the Bush administration, all of these churches got a ton of money from the government, a ton of money from the government, okay? And so they want to support what they think is the right thing to do. But we've got to say to them, no, sorry, we're not going to go that way, okay? We're going to go the right way, and we're going to vote for human rights. ¿Sí se puede?
Absolutely.
So I know people want to ask questions. Shall I keep talking, or is it time for questions?
We could start the
I think
questions.
we're good with questions.
Okay.
Yeah. So I want you to know that our students, we had several students from not just our college, but from NARCO also submit questions for you today. So Ben and I are going to take turns asking you some
Okay.
things, if that's okay. So I'm going to let Ben start.
All right. So one of the first questions that was asked was, what was the most challenging moment you faced as an activist, and how did you find the strength to keep going?
Well, I think we had, let me just say that, I think for people who want to become activists, the main challenge is in our heads, we think, can I really do this? You know, and I want to say to you that, yes, you can do it. You've got to have faith in yourself, and people that you want to help or trying to help, people will, they will accept your help. And sometimes we think that maybe I want to help people, but they won't accept my help. And that's one of the things that Caesar taught me, because I had a middle class upbringing. You know, I got a chance to go to college. My family has been here 14 generations in New Mexico. I say, take that, Donald Trump, okay? So I had a very, you might say, a good preparation. But when I went down to work with farm workers in Delano, I told Caesar, do you think I can really help? And you know what he told me? He said, if they didn't need your help, they would already have been organized, okay? You know, and before that, like we belonged to another organization, the community service organization, who did a lot of charity work. So with the work that we did with UFW and the work that we're doing with my foundation now is to empower people, not to just give services, you know, or charity, but to empower people, to make them understand that they have power and that the power is in each and every one of us, and that we can make things, we can change things. That we don't, and in fact, the main thing that we say to people when we organize them is, you cannot expect anybody to come and do this for you. You have to do it for yourself. And you may not have a school preparación, a high school education, or a college education. You may not speak English well. You may not be a citizen. That doesn't make any difference. You have power. But you remember this, that you can't do it by yourself, that we got to have people that come together. I like to say, even Jesus Christ, who was God, he needed the 12 disciples to help him, you know? He knew he couldn't do it by himself. So that's the main thing. I think that's a challenge that all of us have. And in terms of getting discouraged, things don't always turn out the way that we want them. And yes, we have challenges, but the main thing is that you can't quit, because the only time that we lose is when we quit and when we give up. And so we can never let that happen. That was a long answer.
Thank you. No, yes, it was. Thank you. Thank you.
So when things got tough, what was your main motivation to keep fighting for the farm workers' rights?
Well, we know that what we were trying to do, and we're still trying to do in terms of our community, it's not an easy task. It's a difficult task. And the main thing that you know that it's a journey. And as you go on that journey, while you're trying to achieve your goals, you're learning things. You're learning a lot. And you meet a lot of people, and some people are supportive, and you learn from them. And then some people are against you, but you also learn from them. That's the one thing that we have to remember. And so I think that's what keeps you going. But you have to keep your eye on the prize. You have to keep your eye on the goal. And just know that it's a journey. And when things don't go the way that you want them to go, you have to think, okay, a good example is when we did the strike in Delano. Great strike, had people come out of the fields, but we're so close to Mexico that they would bring in more strike breakers. Almost, we take people out of the fields, the next day there was a whole new crew, you know. And so, but the one thing that saved us was we're not going to win this way, you know, with just striking. And so when we started doing the boycott, you know, then that's how we won, by getting people not to buy grapes, or getting people to picket stores where they were selling grapes. And that's the way that we won. We got, I think, something like 12 million Americans in the United States that didn't buy grapes. And that's how we won. So when things don't go the way that you want, then you have an obstacle, but then you learn from that, and then you just have to make another turn. left, right, or U-turn, whatever, to make things happen. The main thing is don't give up.
Thank you. I have a follow-up question. What are your thoughts on the current state of farm workers' rights and working conditions?
Well, as you all know, the farm workers just got a really good bill signed by Governor Gavin Newsom that the farm workers can actually elect their union representative through the mail. Because before they were, the way that the elections were before, they had to do it in person, and the union had a representative, and the boss had a representative, and it was always intimidating for the workers because they knew that the boss's guy was looking at them to see how they were going to vote, even though it was a secret ballot. But now they can vote from home, they can send in a ballot, and it will make it a lot easier. But the main problem the United Farm Workers is having, and I resigned from the UFW in 2022, the main problem they're having right now is that even after they win elections, the employers refuse to sign, you know, and they take it to court, they spend millions of dollars on attorneys. That money that they spend on attorneys could be going to the workers, you know, so they can have a pension plan. The only farm workers that have a pension plan are the ones that work under United Farm Workers contracts, okay? But so, and that all comes from racism. And I want to share the words with you when Caesar called me to his house one Sunday morning and said, I want to talk to you. This is before we started the union. And there in his wife Helen's kitchen, he said, farm workers are never going to have a union unless you and I do it. And I started laughing because I thought he was kidding. And he said, no, he said, really, I'm serious. And then right after that, in his next breath, he said, but we will not see a national union for farm workers in our lifetime. And I said, why, Caesar? You know, we learned how to organize, and I'll tell you that little story in a minute. But we're good organizers, and we're in our 30s or early 30s. I was like 32. And he said, because the growers are too rich, they're too powerful, and they're too racist. And that's still the situation today. Not only that, but only in California do farm workers have the right to have a union. They don't have that right in Arizona or Texas or any of these other states. And unfortunately, it's got to be a state law, not a national law. And so there's still a lot of work to do to get farm workers. But if we can get good governors in some of these other states and not some of the crazies that they have now, then maybe farm workers could have a union. And not only that, they don't have unemployment insurance. California, Hawaii, and now New York are the only 3 states where farm workers have unemployment insurance.
Only 3. You said you were gonna have you had a story to follow up with that, or that was the story?
The follow-up story? The follow-up story is that I kind of want to tell people how Cecil and I learned how to organize in the first place. And actually, we were taught by a gringo, a gabacho, an Anglo. And his name was Fred Ross, Sr. And actually, he did an organizing campaign down here in this part of California when they organized to desegregate the schools. You may have heard of that documentary, Mendes versus Westminster. Well, Fred Ross Sr. is the man who organized the Latino community to file that lawsuit to desegregate the schools. So he had a great reputation as an organizer. There's a book that was written about him called The Social Arsonist. So I won't tell you all his story, it'll take us another 15 minutes. But anyway, Social Arsonist, if you want to read his book, and then they're doing a documentary about him also. But he's the one that taught Cesar how to organize and taught myself how to organize and many other people. So I like to say that the founder of the Chicano movement was an Anglo named Fred Ross Sr.
So students are really curious about whether or not you and your loved ones have ever received any threats from those that are against your cause.
Yeah, we received many threats. Cesar received so many threats that we always had to have security around Caesar everywhere that he went. He had many death threats. And they even They even got one of the guys that was, he had been contracted to kill Caesar. And what they did is, in the sheriffs in Bakersfield, California, they finally found the guy because he had killed somebody else. He was a contract killer. But when he was in the jail in Bakersfield, guess what? They let him have a press conference to say that he wasn't trying to kill Caesar. But the way they found out that he had a contract to kill Caesar, because they had an undercover FBI agent, and he's the one that found out. And part of the people that were involved in that were some of the growers' sons. And this guy was investigating. He was investigating initially some drug transactions, and they found like $25,000 that one of the growers' sons had in the refrigerator. And he asked him, "What's this money for?" Oh, see, that's going to go to the guy that's going to kill Cesar Chavez. Yeah. I mean, so he had many, many death threats. And myself personally, like a lot of us in the union, we had threats also. One time at my house, about 4 o'clock in the morning, somebody knocked on my door. And I have one of my sons is an attorney. His name is Dolores Huerta. And he's kind of conservative when he was a kid. And he made me lock the door, put the chain on the door. And I said, "We don't have to do that, Miguel." He said, "Yeah, put the chain on the door." He's only 8 years old then. And then he said, "Put the lights on in the porch." "Oh, okay, I'll put the lights on in the porch." Well, about 4 o'clock in the morning, somebody came to my door and they knocked on the door. And I said, "Who is it?" They said, "We have a message from Helen Chavez, that's Caesar's wife." And I said, and I thought, oh, maybe something happened to Caesar, right? So I went to open the door, and then they tried to push the door, but I had the chain there, so the door kind of went back. And then they went and they got a big rock, and they broke I had a picture window at my house, and my son Emilio was sleeping right under the window, and they smashed the window with a rock, and Emilio jumped up. Well, then I told the kids, go make sure all the back doors locked, all the windows are locked. So they kept going around the house, and tried to get into the house, but they weren't able to get into the house. But it was very, very scary because I was there alone with my kids. I think that's the one time I can say I was really scared. My whole body was like this, shaking. I locked myself in the bathroom. I thought, what am I going to protect myself with? All I had was a dark whole queen. And so I put Emilio through the window, and I told him, go see if we can find somebody to come and help us. And he didn't come back for a long time. I thought, oh my God, they got my son. But he said that he was hiding, but he could see them circling around the house. And they finally left. And I saw that man afterwards, but he was a foreman for one of the big growers in Bakersfield, California. And again, when I saw him, my knees went totally weak. And I think that's the one time I was scared. And of course, I recommend, if you haven't seen the documentary Dolores, okay? It's called Dolores the movie. It's you can get on YouTube, on PBS, and on Amazon. And there you see where I was beaten up by the police in San Francisco. And the reason I was beaten up is Cesar Chavez did these fasts. He did the first one for 25 days in Delano, California, the second one in Arizona for 25 days, and then the last one was for 36 days. And he did that fast to bring to the attention of the American public about how pesticides were killing farm workers and their children, and how many children were being born with deformities. And so after Caesar finished that 36-day fast, he went to go rest somewhere to get well. And George Walker Bush, the first Bush president, was running for the presidency. And after Caesar finished this 36-day fast, George Walker Bush had a press conference in Fresno saying, "There's nothing wrong with pesticide. Our government is protecting you." And so then he was going to be in San Francisco. So I drove to San Francisco to do a press conference saying that he was wrong. The farm workers and their children were dying from the poisons on our food. And while I was there, I got beat up by the police. So, and that's all in the video, in the movie. It's a documentary by Peter Bratt and Benjamin Bratt. So if you haven't seen it, I recommend it, okay?
Do we want to do a couple questions from our guests that are here today? We do have a mic, right? Are there anyone that wants to ask a question from those who are in attendance today? We have a hand back there in the middle row. Eddie? Go ahead and stand up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming. I guess my question would be, can you expand on how the Chicano movement led to everything else? Because I think that that's a part of history that we don't emphasize enough, because that definitely was a catalyst for a lot of other movements that we saw throughout the United States. So if you can expand on that a little bit.
So I'm just asking if you can share how you see that the Chicano movement and all of the activism that took place, how that led to other movements in the state.
Yeah, that's a great question. And yes, when the farm workers went out on strike, then we had what happened in Los Angeles with Sal Castro when they had the walkouts in the schools. And Sal Castro also said this, that the farm workers really inspired them, because when they saw the farm workers walking out of the field, then they decided to walk out of the schools. Mm-hmm. Then we had many other organizations that came out of that. MECHA, that organization started. Southwest Voter Registration started. Many other Latino organizations came out of they were inspired by the farm worker movement. And not only that, but the labor unions, a lot of the labor unions started copying, the way that the farm workers organized. And so the ramifications of the farm workers movement actually went, you might say, on a national level, because then people started organizing in Arizona, people started organizing in Texas, in Michigan, all over in many of the states. Iowa, the Latinos that got together started organizing.
Thank you. Any other questions? Oh, we have one right here.
I had a question. To give you my background, I was a political science major, and I grew up in Riverside starting in the 1960s. So I went to school when my mother went to the supermarket. We saw the sign saying, "Don't buy grapes." And my mentor was Francis Carney, who studied California politics. And so he was in with many of those rooms with you and Caesar and the growers. And one of the things he emphasized with the students was how remarkable it was. And he's never understood, and I would like to know how you were able to maintain, given the extreme violence that goes on with strikes and the labor movement, how you were able to maintain the discipline of nonviolence in your efforts. I mean, that's a miracle.
Well, both Cesar and I were, I didn't know this when I met Cesar, that he knew all about Gandhi. Of course, I had learned all about Gandhi when I was in school, in college. And so both of us were kind of on the same page when it came to the issue of nonviolence. And we know that the countries that we come from, that there's a lot of violence in those countries. And so we felt that if we did not take the path of nonviolence, and if the farm workers started killing people, then, pretty soon, as Caesar said, we would start killing each other, as they did in some of these other organizations. And it was hard, because we had 5 people that were killed in the farm worker movement. The first one was a Jewish girl from Boston, Nan Freeman, and she was killed. She was run down by a truck in a sugarcane strike in Florida. Our second martyr was Naji Daifala, a Muslim from Yemen, and Naji was killed by a deputy sheriff in Bakersfield, California. Third martyr was Rufino Contreras, who was killed in a lettuce strike in Calexico. And Rufino walked into a field and was met with a hail of 80 bullets when he walked into that field, because the grower had armed all of the strike breakers and ordered them to shoot at the strikers. Then our fourth martyr was Juan de la Cruz. Juan de la Cruz was had been one of the founding members of the United Farm Workers. He was on a picket line. A labor contractor came by and shot him in the heart. And then our fifth martyr was Rene Lopez. Rene Lopez was young, he was in his early 20s. And he actually, this is after the law passed that farm workers could organize. So he organized the company. It was a dairy there in Carruthers, organized them to go to the union. And after they won the election. And the grower, his brother-in-law, had hired a goon from LA to come up and work against the union. So they were sitting in the car, and they called Rene over, and they said, "We want to talk to you." And Rene went up to the car, put his head to the window, and they shot him in the temple with a gun. And he left a widow, an 18-year-old widow with a baby. It was very, very, very sad for them, for Rene. So there were a lot of farm workers that did a lot of sacrifices. They sacrificed their lives. So it was a very violent. A lot of farm workers were beaten up. They lost their homes. They lost their cars, because the strike lasted for 5 years. That was a big strike, but the people hung in there, and we have to kind of remember them. A lot of people don't remember the martyrs that happened in labor. And I'm going to ask you all a question, and I can't see very well because of the lights, but how many of you know how May Day started and what happened to the labor leaders that fought for the 8-hour day? We all have an 8-hour day. We have weekends. What happened to the labor leaders that fought for the 8-hour day? Does anybody know out there? I don't see any hands.
There's one hand over here.
There's one hand? Good.
On the
Okay.
the third
Yeah,
one.
that needs to be taught in our schools. Labor studies, along with ethnic studies and women's studies, civic engagement, that needs to be taught. They were hung. The 8 labor leaders that fought for the 8-hour day were executed. And, here all of us enjoy the 8-hour day, but we never know where it came from. May Day, they had this big demonstration in Chicago, Illinois, at the turn of the last century, not even this century, the last century, and because these labor leaders were fighting for the 8-hour day. And we got it, but they were killed. So these are things that are not in our school books, and that's why we have to fight to get all of these issues in our school books. And I'm going to say this to end racism. We've got to get that in our school books also. And I just want to say this too, and that we have to remember this, that we are one human race. I remember learning this in the 3rd grade, and I was so thrilled when I read it, because our human race began 70,000 years ago in Africa. And then our human race went across the planet, and they went across the planet. They went to areas where the temperature was colder, so people kind of lost the color of their skin. They got lighter skin, different color eyes, different color hair. But at the end of the day, our human race began in Africa, okay? So we are one human family, and I look to say, all those neo-Nazis out there, you white supremacists out there, get over it, you're Africans, okay? Enough already. Just cut it out, cut it out. And I would say to all of us here to remember that the only way that our human family survived on the planet, because we had to take care of each other and share whatever we had and protect each other. So I would like to ask all of you in the audience, take the hand of the person next to you. Take the hand of the person next to you. Turn to your right and say to that person, "Hello, relative."
Hello, relative.
Turn to the person on your left and say, "Hello, relative." So that is so important for us that we're going to end racism, to remember that. And we should never use the word race unless it's connected with the word human, okay? The human race. That's the only time we can use that word. But we can use the word ethnic groups, okay? We know that, again, talking about Hispanic Heritage Month, that we have a lot of ethnicities, people in Puerto Rico are very different from the people in Peru. The Oaxacan community, even within the Oaxacan community, they have maybe what, 3 or 4 different ethnic groups within the Oaxacan community. So let's use the word ethnic groups instead of race, okay? Because we are one human race.
So it's getting close to the end of our time with you, and we really appreciate that you've been up here with us for this long, because we know that you're so busy. I don't know how you do it. I just have to tell you, I'm in awe of you. I can't believe I'm sitting here talking to you, let alone asking you questions. But I know that one of your passions and one of the many things that you do has to do with empowering young women. So if it's all right, I have a question. Yes, okay. All right, so working together with Cesar Chavez and other leaders to create the farm workers movement and union, what strategies did you as a woman use that gave you the confidence to believe your voice would be heard in a world dominated by white elite men?
And by machista men also. Yeah. I have to confess, my mother was the dominant person in our family. She divorced my dad because he was abusive. And so she raised us. And she was an equal opportunity mother. My brothers had to wash the dishes, sweep the floors, make the beds, do the cooking. But both of my brothers were better cooks than me, okay? And she always made sure that, we were equal in everything. That's the way she raised us. But when I went to work with the farm workers, Cesar gave me some certain instructions, okay? You can't you have to wear long sleeves, you can't go out and party in the bars like I did in Stockton, my hometown. That wouldn't be nice to do that, And so I had to kind of subdue, you might say, a lot of the things that I did in my hometown where I knew everybody in Stockton, California. But then, another thing, Cesar said when we started the union, one of us has to be the spokesperson. Is it okay if I do it? Now, today, if I had my feminist lens on, I would say, okay, then we're going to do it equally, okay? You be the spokesperson, I'll be the spokesperson. But actually what happened, because we had to go to New York and all the other cities to do the boycott, and I was directing the boycott, so I actually became the spokesperson for the union. But within the organization, there was a lot of machismo, and I put up with it for a long time. And finally got to the point where I said, enough. So one time we were having a meeting, and I started, every time they made a sexist joke, I started jotting down, because our meetings used to last all day. We'd have all day board meetings. And so at the end of the meeting, Cesar would say, does anybody have anything they want to say? And I said, yes. And during the time that we were in this meeting, you guys made 58 sexist comments, okay? 58.
Wow.
And so I did that in the meetings. I got it down from 58 to 30 to 20 to 10 to 5 to 1. And so then one of the security guys said, yeah, they all check themselves before they go into the meeting. But then I started saying we have to have more women on the board. And so when I left the union in 2002, we had about a third of the board were women. Well, today, the Farm Workers Union has a woman as the head of the union, Teresa Romero. And the majority of the board are now women on the board of the United Farm Workers. So progress has been made. But I want to say one more thing too, is that I want to quote Coretta Scott King, who said, "We will never have peace in the world until women take power." And we think why? Because we as women, we believe in cooperation, not competition. There is not any woman that wants to see her husband, brother, father, son killed in a war. And I think we're getting there little by little. Right now we have probably a third of the Congress right now, mostly the Democrats that are women. But we have to get to the point where we have 50% and eventually even have a woman president and a Latino president too, for that matter. But another thing I want to say, if there's any board meetings of people are sitting in a boardroom and they're making decisions, unless we have 50% of the people in that boardroom that are women, and I'm gonna say that we use the word feminists, okay? Feminists, then they're gonna make the wrong decision. And I use the word feminist because I know a lot of men in our group today, the men are feminists, okay? And we welcome them because they do support women and they support equality and also reproductive rights for women and immigrants' rights also and civil rights.
That's powerful.
This has truly been a gift. And I hope that our students and everyone in the room understands what a gift this is. It doesn't seem like you're slowing down at all, to us at least. And honestly, like I said before, I don't know where you get the energy because I'm just listening to you and you have all these facts in your head and you're spitting them out and you're telling us all of these stories and all of these things. And so I'm totally in awe of you and the work that you do. So thank you so much for being with us today. Before you go, we have a little something for you.
And I also want to kind of close with a chat.
Sure.
And I just want to say one more thing too. All of these things that I've talked about, having pre-college tuition, free healthcare, free daycare for our families, we can make it happen. But we know that right now in the United States, that we have 10% of the wealth of the United States. I should say 90% of the wealth of the United States is in the hands of 10% of the wealthy corporations and wealthy families. And that's got to be changed, and probably through taxation, whatever, so that the billionaires can start paying their fair share of taxes so that we can get the things that we need for our community. And we have to remember that. And I want to give you another quote. And this is from the Spanish philosopher, Jose Ortega y Gasset. He was a philosopher in education in Spain before the dictator Franco took over. And this is what he said: if the citizens of a country are not educated, the greedy and the powerful and the corrupt will rule. And we have seen that. That just happened to us with our last president that we had. So this is why it's so important that all the things that we've been talking about here today, that we get that into our educational system. And when we talk about elections, look at the school boards. Who's on the school boards? Make sure that we get somebody on those school boards that are going to put ethnic studies into our curriculum, and women's studies and labor studies and civic studies. And so again, I just want to beg all of you, please, please engage in the elections. If you've never done it before, I call it organizing 101. This is how you build up your I call it your emotional fortitude, by going out there, join a campaign here, go knock on the doors, talk to people that you don't know, convince them why they need to vote, especially in our Latino community, because our numbers don't do us any good if we don't put our voices out there. And people who don't have the documents right now to be able to vote, you can still volunteer, because every person, each one of us, if we go out there, we can probably get 40 people to vote that maybe weren't going to vote. Okay, so we want to get amnesty, we want to get more money for education, and we want to get better representatives on our school boards, our city councils, on our supervisors, but the only way we can do that is by voting. So I just want to beg you, all of you, I wish I could give you all the laws that we passed. Some of them, I talked about the amnesty bill, but way back before we started United Farm Workers, and all of you know people that have had advantage of these laws that we passed. And we passed driver's licenses in Spanish, the right to vote in Spanish, that people who were not citizens but had their green cards, that they could get public assistance, aid to the blind, aid to the disabled, old age pensions, aid to needy children. You know, we passed all of these laws, you know, and it was all of us working on the ground to make it happen. And I mentioned the amnesty bill, unemployment insurance, disability insurance for farm workers. These are all laws that we passed. The right that anybody could register somebody else to vote. In Texas, they still have to find a deputy registrar. That's why a lot of people in Texas are not registered. I lobbied all of these bills I'm talking about. I lobbied them through Sacramento and the amnesty bill in the Congress. But it was the fact that we had the people's support that made it happen. So that's why it's so important that all of us become organizers, okay? All of us need to become organized and we can make it happen. So can we do the chat?
Absolutely.
Did I ask everybody to stand up?
Can y'all
I know we've
stand?
been sitting a long time. Okay, so I'm gonna ask everybody a couple of questions that I know you know the answers, okay? The first question I'm gonna ask you who's got the power, and I want you to say, we've got the power. And then the second question is, what kind of power? And I want you to say, people power. But I want you to say it really, really loud, all right? Who's got the power?
We got the power.
Okay, some people aren't sure. Let's do it one more time, but really, really loud, all right? Who's got the power?
We got the power.
What kind of power? People power. Are we going to use our people power? Are we going to go out there and get people elected, good people elected? What do we say? ¿Se puede o no se puede?
Sí se puede.
¿Se puede?
Sí se puede.
¿Se puede?
Sí se puede.
All right, let's all do it in an organized way. Sí se puede. Let's go. Sí se puede. Gracias. Thank you very much for having me. Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Thank you all for joining us today. Thank you, Dolores, so much for joining us.
thank you
It's
for
been an
having
absolute
me.
pleasure. We thank you all for coming. Any faculty who are leaving, make sure you sign out on the Flex sign-out sheet, and pay attention to our Latinx Heritage Month events, and we'll celebrate Cesar Chavez Day come March. So we appreciate you all on behalf of all the co-sponsors, ALASS and Dolores. Thank you so much. This is a little gift from our organization to you, and we really, really appreciate you joining us today. So thank you all
You're
very
welcome.
much. Thank
You're
you.
welcome. Thank you very much.